to the chair. Please press *6 to speak when recognized by the chair. And I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. And our first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the July 21st and the August 4th, 2020 AQUIT meetings. I believe we had an error on the date for the last minutes, and that's why we are reapproving the July 21st meeting. So I would entertain a motion to approve. I've got a motion by Laura. I need a second. I will second. And we will vote. And I believe it's approved. Has everybody voted?
Yeah, that last symbol indicates that he is absent.
Okay. I just can't get it's not going back to my agenda screen. And I'm on 2 different devices, so I'm not sure. It still says waiting. There you go. Perfect. All right. Minutes have been approved. Item 3 is the consent docket. Items A through M. Is there any item that we need to discuss individually?
Madam Vice Chair, item 3H, we would like to defer till our next meeting. One of the vendors has asked some questions, and we would like to respond to those questions before we present that item to you all for consideration.
Okay. So we are striking item H under the consent docket. So I would entertain a motion to approve A through G and then I through M.
Madam Chair, that would be a deferral.
Okay.
Instead of a strike, yeah.
Thank you.
Chris, what's the date that you're wanting to defer that to?
Next meeting is September 15th.
So we are deferring item H to the September 15th board meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. If I could get a motion to approve all items except for item H. It's moved by Laura. If I could get a second. Seconded by Councilman McAtee. And we will vote. The consent docket has been approved. Item 4 on the agenda is the concurrence docket. Concurrence with the City of Oklahoma City and approving a change order with Allen Construction projects PC 0441 II reconstruction and roadway widening BC-0200 bridge replacement and WC-0973 the water line relocation from Western Avenue from Northwest 192nd Street to city limits, an increase of $129,374.84, and no AQUIT funds will be used on this item. If I could get a motion to approve. It's been moved by Laura. Seconded by Councilman McAtee. You could vote, please. It passes. Item number 5 on the agenda are items for individual consideration. And the first item is A, an amendment to the State of Oklahoma, Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, Chickasaw Nation, City of Oklahoma City Water Settlement Agreement. we could get a motion. Been moved by Laura, seconded by Councilman McAtee. If we could vote, please. And the item passes. Under agenda item number 5, there is item B, and I believe we have a presentation. Is that right?
Yes, Madam Vice Chair. Vanessa Aguilar is here to give us a short presentation on this item.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair and trustees. Today we have a presentation for you on the cost of service, rate design, and associated financial planning services. So let's see, I'm going to share my screen. All right, and so the first thing before I begin, with the bid packet item, we do have a minor correction in the notice to proposers. We are striking the time zone designation. Currently, the notice mentions CST, Central Standard Time, so we're proposing to strike that designation, and that's in the mandatory pre-proposal meeting. So just to give you background and some information on the cost of service process and
We can't see your screen.
all right, let me try that again. I apologize. So are you able to see the background slide?
You can see it now.
Okay. Good deal. So to give you background on our request for the proposal, I want to make sure I'm sharing the correct screen. I apologize. Michelle, are you able to see the presentation?
Yes, ma'am. I think you're good.
Okay. All right. So background, Aqua has a long-standing history of incremental annual rate adjustments. Council approved a 4-year rate plan in 2017, and so the last adjustment in that rate plan goes into effect in January of 2021. In addition, to comply with Oklahoma state law, it requires that we do cost of service rates for outside city customers. So that's also an impetus for this cost of service study, is to ensure that we're continue to analyze our costs to provide service to outside city customers and comply with state law. And furthermore, our 5-year capital plan for water and wastewater is $1.7 billion for FY21 through FY 2025. And so I'll go into a little bit more detail on the next slide on those capital drivers. Our capital drivers in our capital plan, we look at aging infrastructure as we're needing to replace neighborhood lines and rehabilitate our infrastructure that's old and throughout our system. That's a key component in our capital plan, as well as our driver for regulatory compliance, as we're meeting the demands of complying with the regulatory agencies. That is also a component in our plan. One of the major capital projects is the wastewater treatment plant improvements at South Canadian. Reliability and resiliency. We want to make sure that our system is reliable and resilient throughout as we have drought conditions and different conditions. We're doing asset management programs. We're making sure that our facilities we have improvements to the facilities to ensure reliability and providing service to our customers. And a major component of the capital program is the Second Atoka pipeline. In the 5-year plan, in our capital plan, we have over $700 million in construction awards and segments of the Second Atoka pipeline, which is the adjacent 100-mile pipeline from southeast Oklahoma to southeast Oklahoma City, providing for additional water supplies to meet the current demands and future demands of our city and our customers. As we look at our financial drivers and our components, so Aquit strives to maintain strong financial management. One of those key components is maintaining our AAA bond ratings from S&P and Moody's. Aquit is in the top 5% of utilities in the nation for water and wastewater and achieving the highest ratings. And what that provides for us is it allows for the lowest borrowing cost, the lowest interest rates possible, so that we're able to borrow for some of these capital improvements, and it provides the lowest rate to our ratepayers. And so how are we able to achieve and maintain our AAA rating? We're able to do that by establishing financial plans and targeting policies that ensure that we have a financial viability in the future. So in our 30-year financial plans, we make sure that we have two times debt service coverage ratio, that we have a 1x fixed charge coverage ratio, a minimum of 90 days working capital for cash on hand, and also a 60 to 40% debt to pay-go ratio, so we ensure we're not over-leveraged as we embark in our capital plans, but also ensuring that we're paying our operating maintenance expenses and our debt service year to year. So within this capital plan and our financial plan, we will see our debt service triple over the 10 years, going from approximately $50 million currently to approximately $150 million in 10 years. And so as we look at going into the future, we really need to look at financial viability, sustainability, and being able to predict what our revenue is going to be, but also looking at affordability for our customers. And that is a key component in balancing those two needs. And we want to make sure that we ensure equity as rates are designed going forward so that it has the least impact on customers that are low volume users, that are flat consumption users throughout the year, and that the capital improvements to increase capacity for demand, that those costs are fairly allocated to customer groups, that usage characteristics and consumption is causing those peaks and causing that demand capacity to be built into our system. So just to walk through a quick summary of the scope within this request for proposals, we are looking to engage a cost of service consultant to help us go through the steps of a cost of service study. And so the main thing we want to do first is engage, that the consultant will work with us and engage Aquit trustees to establish those pricing objective priorities. This will be our roadmap, our guiding principles for the rest of the study. It will provide guidance in looking at rate structures, at different policies or different options as we go through costs and customer groups throughout the project. So that will be the first step, is establishing the pricing objectives. And so from there, the consultant will look at what are the revenue requirements over the next 10 years. So our consultants will take a look at our operating and maintenance expenses, as well as the revenue requirements needed to implement the capital plan that I mentioned, and the associated debt service, so that when we look at that 10-year horizon, we know what revenue requirements we need during that time period. And so from there, the cost of service consultant will do a cost allocation based on function or activity. They will take those costs and segregate them into different activities, whether it's what's the cost for source of supply, what's the cost for treatment, transmission and distribution, for our customer service and billing. Once we've pulled the costs in those different areas, we will have the consultant look at determining the cost of service units by customer class. So in this step, we will look at what are our customer groups. Do we need to redefine customer classes based on usage characteristics, or look at the different cost of service components if we're currently recovering, under recovering, or over recovering. From there on, we'll go into the rate design process. The consultant will look at what rate structures do we want to look at different pricing plan alternatives. And they'll go back to those initial pricing objective priorities that Aquit trustees will establish and prioritize. We'll do a workshop with the trustees in which you look at the objectives and rank them. What's important for our community, for the trustees, for our stakeholders. And that will guide the rate design process as we look at different structures, whether it might be adding an additional tier within the volumetric rate or looking at different components of the base charge to ensure that we're fair and equitable and minimizing the rate impacts to our low volume users. From that, we will wrap up the project with a post-rate design analysis. We want to make sure that the rates that we propose to Aquit and recommend to City Council for adoption, we want to make sure that we go back to that 10-year period and that we ensure that these rates that we're proposing are going to meet the operating and maintenance expenses, that it's going to fund the capital plan while also meeting those financial policies so that we're able to maintain our AAA coverage while also providing for affordability within the project. And so taking a look at the pricing objectives, we have revenue stability and sufficiency. We want to make sure that as an objective that the revenues are stable and that they're predictable. Equity. I mentioned equity as meaning as fairness. We want to make sure that we are recovering the cost and it's proportionate to the customers that are using it and that are causing that cost of service to our system. So we want to make sure it's equitable in proportion to a customer group use of our system. Cost-based. The cost of service consultant will ensure that the rates that we're proposing are going to be cost-based. Affordability. We want to make sure that the impact to our low-income customers, that we want to make sure that we're minimizing the impact within the rate structure. Competitive rates for economic development. We want to ensure that as we look at our current commercial and industrial customers and future prospective customers that might be looking at Oklahoma City to bring in their facilities, we want to make sure that rates are competitive. As we look at the metro and look at surrounding communities in the region, Oklahoma City falls in about the 50th percentile. We're middle of the road, very affordable rates. As we do surveys within the region and locally in the metro, other cities do cost of service studies as well every year, and rates are increasing, and we continue to stay within that middle of the road range when we do comparisons to other cities. Legally defendable. It's very important as the cost of service consultant that we engage in this request for proposal that these rates meet federal, state, local laws, and that they're legally defendable overall is what we propose as a rate plan. Ease of administration. This is also a very important component as we propose a rate structure, a rate plan. We want to make sure that our customer service representatives, that our billing system, that it's a rate structure that's easy to implement, easy to explain to customers as well as to implement within our operations. And last but not least, conservation demand management. We want to make sure as one of the objectives that the rate structure or pricing strategies that we encourage water efficiency, that we encourage demand management, that we're reducing the peak demand to our system. And so as we look at these different pricing objectives, some of these pricing objectives are going to be competing. But this is one of the components that we'll look to Aquit trustees to engage and seek guidance from you to prioritize them and get feedback from you in future workshops as we engage a cost of service consultant to provide a roadmap for us as we embark in the cost of service study. And so from there, just to give you a project timing, so today we present to you a recommendation for approving the request for proposal to engage a cost of service consultant. The proposal deadline for the RFP is September 30th. From there, in the fall, we will work to select and negotiate a professional service agreement with a cost of service consultant. We would like to establish those pricing priorities with AQUIT in the winter. So once we have the consultant on board and we have a notice to proceed, we will come back and have a workshop to go through some of those pricing objectives with you and rank those to give us that starting point. Through the spring of 2021, we will work through and do presentations of findings and workshops. So we'll periodically come back to you with findings as we're progressing to get feedback and input on some of the results. And we anticipate to have the cost of service report finalized by the summer of 2021, so we can recommend a rate plan to AQUIT and present to council by summer of 2021, so we can have that rate plan continue with the adjustments in January of 2022. And so with that, I will turn it over if you have any questions.
Thank you, Vanessa. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mark. Did you have a
Go ahead,
question?
go ahead. No, you're fine. You're fine.
I was just curious, do we do an RFP for cost of service and rate design every 4 years? Or is this
The last request for proposal was in, I believe it was in 2012, and we engaged a cost of service consultant at that point. When we engaged in that contract, we did 2 phases. So the first phase was to implement the first 2 block inclining conservation-oriented rates, and we re-engaged the same consultant to come back and implement phase 2. So this would be the first request for proposal since 2012.
okay?
I had kind of the same question as Jessica, because I vaguely remember Pete White talking about this when he was on the council. And that would have been, Pete would have participated in this, right, Vanessa? In the previous
Yes.
one? And so the consultant we used last time, do we have still their materials where if I wanted to look at them and start to get familiar with what they're going to do and the work they're going to conduct, is that something I can get my hands on?
Absolutely, I can share that. We can have that sent to all of the trustees. We have the cost of service, the final report for phase 1 and for phase 2. For phase 1, the work was done under Red Oak, and then we had an assignment of the contract to Carollo. So the phase 2 final cost of service report was produced by Carollo. It was the same project manager that did the work, Jennifer Ivey, so I can get a copy of that to you as well.
And Vanessa, I didn't get to hear all your reports. City Council ran a little long today, but I would take it that what we're going to do this time, is it the same thing as what we did in 2012? Is it different? Will it have a phase 1 and phase 2?
So we are looking at a similar scope as phase 1. Phase 2 was a different scope of service since we were engaging the same consultant. But in this RFP, we are looking at going through the whole process of doing data collection, doing an analysis of a 10-year requirement of our revenues and our operations and maintenance expenses, our capital plan. So it is going to be more similar to what we did in phase 1.
And then does data collection include customer input or customer interviews? Okay.
But no, I apologize. The data collection will include customer consumption data, data from our billing system. It'll include our financial information, our budgets, our expenditures over the last 3 years. It'll include peak information from our system, from our plants. So a lot of the data we already have internally, and it's part of the data collection will be to gather the information that they need to do to calculate the revenue requirements and the cost of service.
Any thought to interviewing customers for customer expectation?
That's a good question. I know historically we have done forums, surveys. I don't know, we don't have that currently in the request for proposal, but that is something we can definitely include as an optional service and do internally as the utilities department to engage and get feedback.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that, I've noticed the last couple of years is that sometimes we have people complaining about their water bill. They get on social media, and then it turns out when we go out and take a look at their home, it's an internal problem. Something's the matter with the irrigation system. Something's the matter with the number of times in the day that they water their yard, or there's a problem with the pool. And so the more we can do to educate our customers that we work with you, we help you, we do a good job. And sometimes the stuff that gets out on social media it's just wrong.
Right. Yes, and so we do have plans to, within the utilities department, to engage and provide educational material on high bills. And that is a discussion point that as we engage this cost of service consultant and they propose a rate plan, whether it's adding another tier or restructuring our rates, whatever that turns out to be based on the pricing objectives, that we do engage that consultant to participate in maybe the implementation process of explaining the rates and making sure that we look at those impacts to customers, whether it's during the summer, what will those customer bill impacts look like throughout the year, so we can be proactive in our approach and addressing some of those questions and concerns and providing that educational information to customers.
I think that's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
How much is this phase with the consultant going to cost us roughly?
The estimated cost?
Yeah.
We are estimating it could be approximately $400,000. The last cost of service study that we did was roughly around that range. Now, granted, that was awarded back in 2013, so adjusting for inflation, I would anticipate that to be a good estimate for right now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions from trustees? Vanessa, thank you so much. It was a very great
Thank you very
presentation.
much.
Time.
Thank you.
Okay, so item B2 on the agenda is the actual request for RFPs to be advertised for the cost of service rate design and associated financial planning services. And so if I could get a motion to approve. Been moved by Councilman Stonecipher, seconded by Laura Johnson, and if we can vote, please.
I vote yes. My screen has not come up on the voting, so.
Okay, thank you, Councilman McAtee. Okay, the item has passed. Item 6, are any items from trustees? Nothing? Okay, then we will move to the general manager's report. Mr. Browning.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I only have one thing to report. I'd like to give you all an update on the customer arrears due to COVID-19. Right now, we have about 12,500 customers who are not current with their bills. totaling about $5.4 million. So we're pretty flat in the number of customers and the amount of money that is in arrears at this time.
Hey, Chris, you kind of broke up. What was the number of customers?
About 12,500.
Thank you, sir.
Chris, are we continuing to reach out to them for, to see if there's any other resources that they could use to assist them in paying their water bills and their other utility bills?
Yes, ma'am. Under the CARES Act, the city received funding, and some of that funding was earmarked to help people pay their rent, pay their utility bills, so on and so forth. So we are working with that consultant hired by City Council to reach out to the people to let them know that the money is available and that they can apply it to their utility bills. In addition to that, we're reaching out to some of the other customers personally, apartment complexes, some of the businesses here in Oklahoma City that we wanted to help through the pandemic, to set them up on a payment plan. So we are actively trying to engage our customers in the arrears to help them develop a plan to lessen the impact when we remove the disconnect moratorium.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any citizens to be heard? Okay, seeing none, I believe we are adjourned for the day. Thank you all, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thanks, you too.